I'm Joanne Wilson, and this is Positively Gotham Gal. Real, honest, and meaningful conversations with women entrepreneurs and their approach to life, business, and everything in between. Hey.
Hey, how are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm sorry for my ugly background, but
Don't worry.
my daughter and her boyfriend showed up and everybody's, working from home, but from different places. So I had to go up to the bedroom.
Yeah, I hear ya. Trust me. So we're just gonna get into it. So I'm curious, where did you grow up? I mean, you have such an interesting background of, Japanese and French and international marketing. Do you still speak French?
I do speak French. I actually speak French pretty well. The Japanese is a little rusty unless I'm ordering sushi, but I don't have much opportunity to, I grew up in San Francisco. And since I was about, I want to say 20 months old, I will tell you, I don't tell many people, but I was actually born in New York City at Doctors Hospital. Yeah, my father was back there working. My parents were back there. And then when my younger sister was born, we moved back to San Francisco. They both went to Stanford, so they knew the Bay Area well. And my father went into investment counseling in San Francisco. And but I've had the bug to travel. So I I spent my senior year of high school in France with School Year Abroad, which is one of Andover and Exeter's programs. Yeah, so that's where I got the bug for Europe and for France and French. And then I, because I had to graduate in 4 years, so I went back, my junior year of college to study a little bit more. And then I had to major in French literature because my father would only pay for 4 years of college. So yeah.
So you snuck it in.
Luxembourg. I snuck it in. I've lived all around. I lived in Japan. I lived in Luxembourg. I've lived in Italy. So I worked for Nomura Securities for about 3 years when I was living in Luxembourg. And I sold foreign derivatives, really random things, and then sold IPOs. Yeah.
Got it. Yeah. But then you switched into photography, and was it just this burning passion you had? Were always into the arts? Were you like obsessed with film?
You know what? I ended up marrying a very traditional man who didn't want me waking up and working. Well, he did working, but especially working market hours. So even though my father was an investment counselor, he doesn't believe in nepotism. And so I abandoned the idea of working in the stock market when I came back to California. And, understandably, we wanted to start a family, and it's kind of hard to work market hours in California. So that's when I stopped working. But I'm not the kind of person that can be idle. I just am not. And you know what? It's that tough balance, isn't it? Because my friends my friends that stayed in the corporate world wished that they had been full-time moms. Those of us that were lucky enough to be, I consider myself, I was about like a 3/4 full-time mom. And then I had a photography business on the side, which was a hobby that I'd had since second grade. And I decided to just jump in on that. And then, and then I remember have you ever seen the documentary Born into Brothels?
Yes. It's so good.
It stole my heart. I was absolutely just completely changed after I came out of the theater after seeing that movie. And the biggest feeling I thought was, you are missing out on something. Like, that is your calling and you are missing out. And I think that's why I always said to myself, someday I'm going to make a film. I'm going to take this love for photography that I have and turn it into, visual storytelling.
Which is amazing. It is so hard being a mother of my generation, your generation. And I will say, I hope it gets easier for women as, more people are finding themselves home with their husbands or their partners, and there's children involved, and it is not just like one versus the other.
Yeah, I think this COVID-19 has been especially hard, as you know, on women, and especially on working women, because the burden now of helping with the schooling from home, right? The homeschooling and keeping their job. And it seems that, I'm generalizing, but it seems that most of the men that were working, or the fathers that were working, found a way to sort of close themselves and, have an office in the garage, or have an office somewhere where they can. And so really that burden fell onto women.
On the women, yes. It pains me. I think more women should be like, yo.
Yeah, but I'm hopeful for we have kids about the same age, I believe, and I'm hopeful for their generation, because I do see that so far anyway, it appears that the young men want to be more involved
Yes,
in raising kids.
100%. And if
Yeah.
you're going to live to be 100 years old, why not take off 10 years to have, be involved with raising your children, right? It's a
Right.
very, very, very different thing. So after you saw that film, which I saw too, which I can still visualize the whole film in my head, it was really an unbelievable documentary. How did you say, okay, I'm going to start making films? I mean, did you just pick up a camera? I mean, you must have had like, what is it? Because the first thing you did was you basically turned the camera on yourself.
Well, no, the very first film was called Running for Jim, which,
Ah,
but what happened was I walked out of the theater and I thought, okay, someday, but it's terrifying to just suddenly, jump into something that don't know how to do.
totally.
And I still had, kids at home, 2 kids at home. And so that someday, I can't remember when that film came out, but it was probably about 6 years later when my daughter was running cross country in high school. And her coach was diagnosed with Lou Gehrig's disease.
Uh,
And he was tied for the winningest coach in California history, not just in cross country, but any coach in terms of how many, seasons they had won. And so this team of young women, a cross country team, decided they had to win the state championship in California for their coach to make him, because they knew he was dying. And it's a pretty unbelievable story what happened. That just a lot of different, one of the best runners tripped at the beginning and had to get herself up and went from 85th position up and to finish 16th. My daughter was a strong runner and was co-captain of the team. She had kind of a cold and was on a little bit of cold medicine. She ended up collapsing 5 meters from the finish line and crawled literally on her hands and knees with everybody yelling, don't touch her, because she would have been disqualified. Crawled on her hands and knees across the
Wow.
the finish line, and they won the Division 5 state championship for their coach. So that story went viral. And documentarians came to me and said, hey, we'd really like to make a film about this. And at the same time, ESPN did a 30 for 30 on it. So I said, well, look, I really don't want to make a film about my daughter or anything that involves her, but they didn't need my permission to do this. So I decided to get involved. And I did, and I eventually took the film over, and that was my first foray into filmmaking.
That's amazing. And so who was the people that came in to talk to you? Were they just random documentary makers?
And there was a pretty seasoned documentarian from the Bay Area, and he really taught me a lot about it. And then he had some health issues and ended up not staying on the project. And so I took it over. And I'm telling you, Joanne, that is where having a business degree has really helped me out, because even though I knew nothing about filmmaking, I will tell you that there are incredible documentarians and producers and people in the San Francisco Bay Area that were very generous with their time and helped me. And I would be nowhere if it weren't for them. And one of them is Jamie Redford, who you might know passed away this last year. But he was one of my, so sad. He was one of my very first mentors. And, I spoke to him 3 weeks before he passed away. So that's sad, but I owe a lot of my success in filmmaking to people like Jamie, because, when I had questions, they were gracious with their time and helping me learn my way. But I think having a business degree also has really helped, because I figured out, that what you do is you raise money and then you hire people that are much more experienced than I am. And I had the vision, I had the insight. I knew what could make this film work, but I didn't necessarily have the technical skills, right?
Right. But you understood budgets and what you needed and how you're going to deploy the money. And that makes a huge difference.
Yeah. And how to build a team and what might make, and I think because I'd been a photographer for so many years, I had a vision of what I wanted to see. And if you watch that film, which you can find on Amazon, it's called Running for Jim. It's a sweet story. It doesn't have the highest production value. I didn't know that you couldn't just grab 15 different photographers with all different cameras and put it together. I mean, you can, it worked, but it was not, it's not the way I do things now. But I learned a lot. It was like going to film school. So it was.
That's super cool. And then was Bias the second film?
No, my second film was a film called Code: Debugging the Gender Gap.
Right, and which I saw.
Yeah, I think you came and saw it at Tribeca.
I did.
I remember that. That film I made with a dear friend of mine from college, Stacy Hartman, who had never been a documentarian either, but she's good at networking, and I needed help. And she was terrific to come on, and she helped me with the end of Running for Jim, and then we decided to make this film together. Her daughter was one of the first, before Snapchat even had 10 people. Her daughter was working there, so we really had sort of an inside view of what it was like to be a woman in tech. And that film was incredibly well timed. It came out in 2015. It premiered at Tribeca, and it has now been to something like 80 countries. I mean, I
I'm
have it
sure.
in so many different languages, and yeah.
That's interesting. So how does that go? So you had this passion about women, obviously, as we talked earlier, of like, how do you balance the whole thing? And then you go and you say, this is an area that people need to be more aware of, which is how hard it is for women in this burgeoning area that's going to change all of our lives. And so you went in there and you started talking to people and filming people. And then where do you go when now you've wrapped up this film, right? That you've edited, you feel great about, you're going to, put it in for the Tribeca Film Festival, you get into the Tribeca Film Festival. Then what happens in the post? That you get into 80 different countries.
Well, I just want to say, for those people that are listening that might be budding filmmakers, what you're saying is gracious and it makes it seem super simple. And I just want to tell you, there's a lot of frustrating moments.
Oh, yes.
I mean, for instance, we applied to many film festivals, and we were rejected from probably 8 to 10 film festivals before we heard about, I think, and before we got into Tribeca. So I just want to say that, it's a frustrating process. It's like, I might as well have been applying to Harvard, but Gina, I remember it was Gina and Cara Cusimano, who were at Tribeca, really had the vision of knowing that this was going to be a big issue. And it was, of course, if you were a woman in tech, you knew it was a big issue, but it hadn't really hit if you dug deep, you could find an article maybe on page 4 or something of the Wall Street Journal, but it wasn't really front headlines or anything. And
no, it was only front headlines in the tech world.
Yeah, exactly. And when that film came out, but it was something that really interested me. And I've always been a feminist, and I've always believed in equal opportunity, and I've always been very curious. And a lot of that goes into the work that I do. It's funny because I went back to New York City by myself because that's what I could afford, right? And my producer was gonna meet me there a little bit later. And I remember thinking, well, I'm gonna see some other films. So I bought tickets to other people's films. And as soon as Code, Debugging the Gender Gap, screened at the press screening, I was bombarded. I mean, I didn't have a press agent. I didn't have any, and I'm not exaggerating, I did 17 interviews over 3 days.
Oh my God.
It was insane. I mean, the New Yorker, the Atlantic, I was on, Money Talk or Squawk or whatever it was, CNN. I mean, it was at Bloomberg, the Daily Dot. It was crazy. It was crazy. I didn't know what hit me. And then finally somebody jumped in to help me manage all this. And I remember she said, you can't take the subway. You're going to have to take a taxi because you've got an interview while you're trying to get to Times Square to get on CNN. It was crazy. But it was really fun to see the film take off, and to see it being so well appreciated.
That's amazing. Well, one thing that you've done that very few filmmakers do is you've created a nonprofit around all of these films.
I have, and I guess that started as a business decision, and then I realized how much sense it made, and I'll tell you why. So if you're raising money to make a film, and this happened, or even on with Running for Jim, and I was married at the time, and I remember him saying, well, you can't show that you've made any money this year. I'm not paying taxes on any of this stuff. and then stuff, my hobby, as he called it. And I thought, well, how do you do this? I mean, if people are donating to me, and some people needed to donate to a 501c3, so you have a fiscal sponsor, right? But fiscal sponsors, like at the time, the San Francisco Film Society was charging me, I think they started out at 10 to 11%, which is, so the money would come in. It's significant. I would have to give them that percentage. And it's important to bring money into a 501c3, but even then they would cut me the check immediately, and I would get a 1099, which, basically means I'm paying taxes on that. And I needed every cent of that money but I wouldn't necessarily spend it all within the tax year. So it became really economically like not a very good system. So I looked into what it would be like to start my own 501c3, private foundation, so that I could receive funds. And then also so that I could help other, this was sort of a pipe dream, but maybe I'll have some surplus someday and then I can help some other female filmmaker. And, if she's in a situation like I've been, and I've been again very recently, where it's hard to find funds to make your film. So
It's very hard. I mean, it's hard because, most films don't make money.
That's true.
I mean, I have a friend who put money into a film. It was a huge success. And he's like, I can't believe it. I'm never doing a film again. Like, that was just such luck, right?
Yeah.
But it's harder. And I'm hoping that with the way that everything is now being streamed at home versus in theaters, that we will find on the other side a lot of really great young filmmakers that will just put stuff up and see what happens.
Yeah, I hope so. And putting stuff up, that works on YouTube, right?
Right. Shorts that get funded to make long form.
Yes, exactly. So proof of concept and then moving it forward. But it's still not that easy even to get onto, a platform, for example, right? So, and if you look at the films that Netflix or Amazon or Apple TV, if you look at the films that they're buying, yes, there's some documentaries that they're buying, but mainly, especially Netflix and Amazon, they're mainly buying films that are about drugs or, sex or scandal, or, they're all really sort of edgy. And some of the feedback that I've gotten from my films are, Robin, we want to hire you to come to Netflix headquarters and screen this film for our employees, but they're not going to buy it as an original because it's too much like homework. It's a little too intellectual. And I thought, this is crazy. Like, this is how they're sort of curating content for the average American, I guess. But it's holding back films that, yeah, maybe when you come home at night, you don't want to have to think too hard, put your feet up, have a beer and watch something that's brainless. But I really believe there's a portion of the population that actually does want to learn something, whether it's about implicit bias or anything. So I'd say that's a frustrating, like with this film now that I have, Savvy, that I'm just about to finish. I'm not sure where it's going to premiere yet. I'm submitting to film festivals. Yes, I can maybe put it in front of Amazon Prime and Netflix and Apple TV and Hulu. They're not busting down my door, in fairness, maybe they don't know about the film yet, but you and I both know how important it is that women take charge of their personal finances.
Completely. I mean, it is a huge issue. Not only is it a huge issue, but we have actually jumped the chasm where women are making more money than men. And I have had friends who have lost their husbands or have gotten divorced and had no fucking clue what was going on in the finances. And these are super savvy human beings, really smart women. And, my parents got divorced and my mom drilled into me, don't lose sight of the finances, because she didn't really know what was going on. And she, always had this belief that there was all this money there that she kind of got screwed out of. And maybe she did. I don't know the answer, but she literally just, that was something he did.
Yeah. So the question that I had was, why? Like, why is that? Is this gender norms? Is it because, why is it? Is it because of this fairy tale thing that women want to be taken care of? Is it because if we have sort of equal say, equal understanding, equal power with money, then it emasculates the man? And, I'm talking about, of course, in heterosexual relationships, but there've been studies done that show that even in same-sex relationships, 52% of women tend to abdicate the decisions to somebody else, right? So even in same-sex, female relationships, neither one of them really wants to handle the money. So it's fascinating. The other thing that was incredibly alarming to me was that it's not getting better. Millennials are more likely to abdicate financial decisions to somebody else than, say, than any other generation right now, actually. So that's frightening, right? Than baby boomers even. So if I'm a boomer, this is millennials that are doing this. And the question is why?
I don't know why. Is it, maybe it's just because millennials are so programmed to go after what interests them. And this is not something like I'm really interested in making chocolate, or I'm interested in learning how to resole shoes, or I'm interested in whatever it may be. And like, I don't really care about the money.
Yes, I believe that's true. And I also think that money is masculized. So when you think about Wall Street, and Sally Krawcheck talks about this in a really very profound way, you think about the way that it's not like men purposely designed Wall Street and the stock market to exclude women. That didn't happen. It's just that they made it themselves, and there weren't a lot of women in there to put, it was a fairly homogeneous population that
Yes,
designed it.
yes.
And so the acronyms and, the analogies of it, the warlike analogies and everything just don't appeal to women. It's actually pretty intimidating to women. And
Hmm.
so even if you probably asked 5 of your friends, and if I asked 5 of mine, do you actively invest in the stock market? They're going to be like, no. And even if they're incredibly smart, capable women, it's not that hard, right? And especially now with technology, it's so exciting, because with technology now, there are ways that you can buy a quarter of a share of Berkshire Hathaway, or a fractional share of, Apple, if you don't have, however many hundreds of dollars,
Yeah, no, it's
129 or something.
totally changed. But I think that also money bequeaths power. And there is something about that I think turns off a lot of women.
This is probably true, or that subconsciously informs us that it's not our territory, right?
Perhaps.
Because I do believe that women want to be powerful. And I can tell you, and this sort of we can go into the whole idea of financial abuse. What is financial abuse? And it's not just necessarily somebody stealing from you, but it might be, living with a spouse or a partner who doesn't share information with you, that doesn't make it all transparent. And that's a big problem.
That's
It's
a
a big
huge
problem.
problem.
And financial abuse can happen at any level. You could be bringing home $20 million a year and be in a financially abusive relationship.
Oh
So
yeah, I mean, it doesn't matter the number, it's just the
right.
relationship. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, I mean, this is to me a very, very important thing. And of course, I have certainly reacted to the female films that you've done, because, that is a major interest for me. And I want to see more equality for women, particularly in the tech industry, which is why I love that film as well, which is, it is utterly ridiculous. I do think that there's been a lot of change in the tech industry, where there are women that are now joining boards that are at a very, very, very high level. And those women have been around, and their careers have just exploded over the last 10 years. And people are making conscious decisions to ensure that those boards have really great women on them. And so that makes me very happy.
Yeah, it is moving in the right direction, and I hope that it continues. And I think you just saw that the NASDAQ was saying that they're going to consider not letting companies, trade on NASDAQ if they don't have a woman on the board. And I think
Amazing.
that it took a woman leading the NASDAQ to make that decision. But I think this is the type of thing that has to, and somebody would say, do you believe in sort of sanctioning these type of things, or do you believe in mandating these things? Well, if that's what we need to do to make it happen, yes.
So be it. I totally
Yeah.
agree. So would you call your work cause-based documentaries? Like now that you've finished one and there is a whole process that's going to take you, there must be something in the back of your head thinking about, well, what's the next thing that I want to make?
Yeah, I mean, cause-based, it sounds so boring, doesn't it? And the worst is when somebody says, oh, you make corporate videos. I'm like, no.
No, you do not make, no, definitely not corporate.
No.
No, to me, you're highlighting pieces of society that, as we're all questioning why, and we can read a million articles about it, when you can see it in a film that is, 90 minutes or 2 hours, and hear the real voices that tell a story together, that is so much more powerful than, sitting down and reading all these articles.
No, I mean, I agree with you. And I just love visual storytelling. And my goal for Savvy documentary, or just sort of my personal artistic goal, was to try to make it a little bit less talking head, with just these amazing experts that are sharing information and their deep well of knowledge, but to bring in really personal stories. And so Savvy documentary has 5 or 6 different characters that we call them, or subjects that share their personal stories. First generation Latina woman who is at Brown University on a full ride scholarship, and everywhere she turns, there's another bank trying to give her a credit card. And she's like, whoa, what, free money? Nobody ever explained to her what, APR is and how expensive this debt could be, that she had to, it said, pay this. Oh, I only owe $23. Wow, that's cool. Nobody ever understood, the negative, or explained to her. And she ended up in, over $25,000 of debt, right? Or
and the credit card company is like, yay!
Exactly. I think they are no longer allowed to market like that on college campuses. But
I believe that is correct.
Yeah,
free cards.
Yeah,
there you go.
Here, come get a free T-shirt. Come get a piece of pizza. Here's a Frisbee, and they're like, oh great, all you have to do is sign up right here, right? So we have a story about that. We have a story about predatory student loan debt. We have a story about financial abuse. There's a wonderful story about a group of women who started in their 30s, started an investment club, and they're now in their 80s. And this was, oh my God.
Oh my God. I saw that clip and I was on the floor. Those women look amazing.
They look amazing. They're hilarious. But can you imagine, they're so wonderful to work with. Can you imagine that we had to film that in the middle of COVID, in the middle of the fires in California, in the middle of a heat wave? And it was between the air quality. We had to shoot outside because, because of COVID.
Yes.
Because we had 14 ladies and they all insisted on being there. Like every one of them said, no, we're going to be there for this shoot. It was the most exciting thing that had happened to them. They kept telling me. So we had to shoot outside. One of the women graciously lent us her backyard, which was beautiful and perfect. But then we had the California wildfires. And if the air quality was of a certain, it's my responsibility. There's the California Film Commission that's telling me what I can do. And there's my own personal sense of responsibility with my team about, do we want these elderly women out in 100-degree heat with the air quality of smoke? And so we happened to, luckily, you have to plan this way ahead, because I had 11 people that were just the crew. And by the grace of God, we ended up finding 24 hours where it just all came together, and we had low air quality. The heat was down to 90 degrees rather than 112. And we got that filming done, and just was so relieved. And it's just great to show how these women became empowered and proud of themselves and confident when they learned about money. They learned about the stock market. They're like, wow, I can stand there with the men at the cocktail party now, right? I don't have to be talking about diapers and cribs.
Well, it's the same thing with women founders, is that when they go out and raise money, the first time, they are a little more reserved and unsure. They're, crossing their T's and dotting their I's. And then they get to a point where their businesses really take off, and then they own the room.
Yep.
And men own the room from the minute they walk in. And if they don't know what they're doing, they don't even ask. They'll figure it out, and nobody will ever know. And so it is fake it till you make it. And we need more women faking it till they make it.
Yeah, I would agree with you. And I also think, but there are some biological differences between men and women. And I think,
for sure,
testosterone is one. Men have more of it than women do. And that does play into our confidence level. And you've seen the same studies that I have out of McKinsey, and where, if there are 10 job qualifications, right, a woman is going to, even if she has all 10, she's not going to apply with a lot of confidence that she's going to get the job. A man needs only 60% of the qualifications. He's like, dude, I got this nailed. I'm going to get this job. And,
it's amazing. It is.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. I remember Maria Clave, who runs Harvey Mudd College.
Yeah. I've talked to her. She's amazing.
She's fabulous. So I filmed her in Code Debugging the Gender Gap, but she told me this great story once, sort of off record, about how there was a company back east that was really trying to up their percentage of women, and they couldn't for the life of them figure out why. I think it was actually a government agency, and they couldn't figure out why they couldn't attract more women. And she said, okay, well, I'll come back and consult with you. And so she flies back and she walks into the lobby, and in the lobby, there are these black and white World War II, pictures all over the walls. And there's like a cigarette holder and a cigar holder on the front table. And the magazines were like from the NRA and stuff like that. And she's like, well, I'll tell you why. Like, women would not feel comfortable. She's like, I don't even feel comfortable in this lobby, And again, it's unconscious, right? Like the men didn't think that they were trying to necessarily marginalize women by the way that they just designed.
Right.
It's just that that's who was there. They designed it for their liking, and
Yeah, that
they
was
didn't know
that.
who they.
So do you have another one on simmer on the back of your stove?
You know, honestly, I don't right now, and I'll tell you why. I think this is a little bit of like self-governing because it's really been I am so excited about Savvy documentary. I think it might be my best film ever. Well, best film ever in 10 years, best film out of 5.
The more you
But
make them, the better you get.
but it was also fundraising for this, Joanne, was absolutely a bear. I mean, to the point where you know, I'd committed to making the film. I had hired everybody. I wasn't going to stop production, and I was really worried about how am I've only raised a third of the film's money, and especially during COVID, I understand that companies and individuals are thinking, I want to put my money toward the front line. I want to help people that are dying of COVID. I want to help get a vaccine. I want to help. Then Black Lives Matter hit, which of course is, you know, the film before this I made was called Bias, about unconscious gender and racial bias. So that was something that I was, you know, feel very strongly about, and understood people when they said we're putting all of our money right now toward, you know, Black entrepreneurs or toward, you know, helping with that. And so I felt at a certain point where I couldn't push any harder trying to raise money for my film. And I really had to take about 3 months off of fundraising, even just so that I didn't,
Wow.
you know, I had to be careful. I
Yeah.
mean, I firmly believe that women taking ownership of their personal finances is going to be even more important in this COVID-19 era, and given the Black Lives Matter movement, right? Because it has a lot to do with, you know, the racial wealth gap, and of course the gender wage gap. And so what I'm saying is, I would love to do another film, and I will do another film. I would like to be commissioned to make a film. I would like to try that. If it's something that I believe in and I'm really thrilled about, and somebody said to me, Robin, what do you think about making a film about X, Y, and Z? And I have the funding for it. Do you know what a relief that would be?
I'm sure. Unfortunately, you know, in this country, we don't have that as part of our arts council, and we should, because in Europe they do, and
Canada
does too.
Yeah.
And so there are so many fantastic artists that is ridiculous that they cannot get some kind of funding from this country that has so much wealth to make films or make art or whatever it is that they choose to do, for other people to be able to see that and make an impact on their lives.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think that I think documentary filmmaking, you know, especially independent filmmakers, it's an art that that is in jeopardy if it's not easier to find funding. And yes, you're right. I've done Indiegogo, Kickstarter. It is a great way to raise, you know, but there are limits to how much you can raise money on that, I think, unless you're, you know, somebody super well known and popular, then I'm sure that you could find a way to do it. But it takes an enormous amount of work to, say, raise, you know, $50,000. And if your budget is 1.2 million, you know, it does a little bit. It gets sort of a groundswell of people thinking about it. We did that for Code. We did that for Bias. I didn't do it for Savvy, honestly, because I didn't have the manpower to do it.
I get it.
Yeah, you have to really keep up.
But your trailer is so powerful that, you know, I can't imagine there's not a woman that's going to watch it and that it's going to resonate with.
Yeah, and I think women of all age too. And then what I want them to do is I want them to bring their partners, their sons, their brothers into the theater, or into the room to watch it, because I test marketed the rough cut of Savvy to all sorts of different demographics. But interestingly, men in their sort of 20s and 30s really liked it and wanted to know why I didn't have a male subject talking about money. And what I think we tapped into was that even though I really did set up the film to say, this is a film about women for women, I never want to marginalize my male audience. I love my male audience. I love my allies. And I think it's very important to keep them, you know, as part of the discussion. And so I work hard to do that. At the same time, I'm sort of unapologetically, you know, a feminist and going to help, but we can't be anywhere in the feminist movement without men's help, right? We need their help.
100%. We do need their help.
So, but I thought it was really interesting that these 20-something-year-old men admitted that they learned something from the film, and they were jotting down notes, and they were thought, well, gosh, I've never checked my credit score. I should see what my credit score is. And I had no idea that people that do interviews have actually, checked my credit score,
Millennials.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyway,
So-
thank you so much for coming on today. I'm super excited about this Film Savvy. It is more important today than it has ever been that there is equality in everything, and finances is really the foundation for everything.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's this great transfer of wealth happening too, right? So in the next 20
Huge.
years, women are going to be the primary holders of more money than men. And so
Yes.
we need to learn how to handle it, how to make it grow, and how to put it to good use.
Totally. All right. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
All right. Take care.